Today's topic is mastery of the air element. So we're going through these systematically. As you can see, we started with Earth, and that's the densest element, and we're gradually getting into these more rarefied and spacious elements. So I want to give kind of a backtrack and just talk what this is all really supposed to be about. And really, it's a level of inner understanding that can lead to self-mastery. And again, I want to emphasize how these are things and tactics and techniques that not only go back to the earliest, written records of human history, but also spans every culture. And this is something that's always blown me away. And the longer I go on and studying these facts, it's like the more it is apparent how universal these things actually are. And early on, maybe when I was 17 or 18, I started really getting into symbolism. And from there, the whole Jungian concept just completely infiltrated my consciousness, and I realized how critical it is. And every once in a while you get these quotations from people like Chairman Mao that blow your mind. He's the one that said, I'm not afraid of an armed revolution, I'm afraid of someone with a big idea. But he also has a famous statement. This might have come from Confucius, actually, but he said, the world isn't run by governments and force of arms, it's run by signs and symbols. And so what that means to me is that there's archetypical patterns underlying matter itself, but in particular underlying the human experience of this planet Earth. So, which is to say that there's certain factors of our biology in our bodies, as well as our outer world, that are so persistent and so universal that, in essence, it's a kind of psychic architecture that's encoded into our DNA. Like when I was in college, I started studying biosocial anthropology, and that's kind of what it was all about, is how, earlier in the 19th and early 20th centuries, it was always kind of assumed that humans are a tabula rasa, or blank slate, when they're born, and then everything is a result of their education and so on. But that's really not true. We're born not only biologically with this kind of preset kind of firmware or hardware, but also a whole set of ideas and concepts that people now refer to as archetypes, right? So if you study these, there's a lot of benefit to that. First of all, you realize your own true potential, and you can also start to understand the developmental process that human beings would naturally go through if it weren't for consciously studied and propagated programming that's put into us to disable our natural unfoldment and evolution, so that we remain in this like consumer slavery. Okay, so and my point is, if you begin to understand this inner nature of humanity and how it functions, and to trust it, most importantly, to trust it, and to learn how to feed and encourage and strengthen this process, you can unfold what's considered now in our degraded society as supernatural abilities, And I could give so many hundreds of examples from my life about all this, but I'm just going to say, if you're listening to this far, already 4 minutes in, you're probably kind of accepting that that's possible, okay? And so that's why I'm doing all this, is to I know there's lots of people out there, and I want to give thanks to all my friends. I don't have really any friends in real life. The only people that I interact with is online. And I know a lot of the people that I interact with are like me. They're wherever they are around the world. Most of the people that I interact with are either very far away in the United States or in other countries, which is odd to me. But the point is that we have this common thing that we're interested in. And so when we connect in this way, even if it's not in our physical life. Like, it makes us feel less alone, and like give us support and give us encouragement and give us raw materials for further research. Okay, so that was kind of a long introduction. So now I kind of speed through the whole mastery of air element concept. So as you go through life, you go through these different stages of human development. You start off as a baby trying to learn about your body. Then you start to learn about relations and how humans interact with each other, and how we vibe on each other, and how different people are attracted to different things, and how those people will congregate. And that's kind of the relational, emotion-based water state. And then, let's say you go out into the world, your primary education process ends, and you go out into the world and you get involved in things like commerce, right? And so when it comes to commerce and jobs, the emotionality and all these subjective aesthetic concerns are not so critical. It's all about what can be weighed and measured, keeping track of things. If you have a job, you have to keep track of your inventory. You have to keep careful accounting of how much currency is exchanged, and everything is kind of these numbers. And it's kind of a detached, abstract world of math and budgets, And when I say budgets, that doesn't pertain just to money, but it pertains to time and energy as well. So you need a plan. You need a strategic, blueprint of how to pursue certain goals that you have. And you need a logical step-by-step process. And this is something that doesn't work so well strictly based on emotions. And most of the things we do, we're combining all these elements to some degree. But my point is to say that there's a lot of endeavors in life where you kind of need to leave your emotions behind and your likes and dislikes, and you need to be able to objectively evaluate information in a logical way. And this is where the air elements come in. It's the element of intellect. Okay, think about playing chess, right? If you're a really good chess player or any kind of strategic operation, there's a certain amount of instinct involved in intuition, but what you really need as the most reliable way to be a good strategist is you need to coldly detach and do things in a purely systematic way. Like, let's say you're playing a chess game. You need to sit and analyze each possible move, a whole variety, probably dozens. It's not infinite, certainly, but as you become a good player, your instincts will kind of guide you. They say if you play, 10,000 hands of poker, if you play 10,000 chess games, you get a level of mastery, and you can kind of make bigger leaps because you know where to look, right? But in the beginning, and you really want to go through this very systematic process of cold analysis, of looking at all possible alternatives and seeing how each one can play out, and doing a kind of calculus that's, like if you're playing chess, there's different values for all the pieces, and you want to look at least 2 or 3 moves ahead of each type of scenario that your decision tree in the past that you're going to choose. Like, you need to have a way to calculate what's more favorable. You take into account the position of the pieces on the board, who's controlling the center. Then you take into account the value of the pieces, like which stage of the game you're at. Then you want to have like an evaluation of the other player, like what type of tactics they tend to prefer. And a lot of these things will apply to poker. Like if you're playing Texas Hold'em, then you're gonna kind of count the cards. How many players are in the hand? What's your position? Are you on the button? Like all these different things go into how you're gonna strategically play the game. And this is where the air element comes in. It's this ability for strategic thought and the ability to think long term, to think big picture, and to think about the ultimate result, right? So you never want to get too emotional about anything. You want to think big picture, because if you get emotional in any moment about the temporary conditions that you're in, you're gonna zoom in on that, and you're gonna kind of stick to that. Like water always seeks to go down as far as possible. It's like you're deepening with this emotional awareness, and you just kind of get stuck in that moment, and your ability for big picture thinking kind of fades. And so that's where this air element comes in. And so with each of these, I try to talk about the pros and cons of the air element. And so far, I'm just talking about the pros, like the usefulness of the air element, what it's for. It is for analysis, okay? So let's look at the air element. With each of these, I want to kind of look at the physicality of how this metaphor applies. Okay, so with air and gases, right, they always want to spread out as much as possible, and their nature is to spread. And so with air too, like we all have to breathe air. All living beings have to respirate, you know, above a certain level. I'm sure there's some like microbes and stuff that don't need any air, but most living beings of any scale, like we all have to breathe, and that's something that we all have in common. And so one of the main things that's associated with air is communications, words, and the ability to take both abstract concepts, emotions and feelings, and all these nebulous kind of things that are kind of hazy or cloudy, and solidify it down into something super concrete. You know, like if a teacher's trying to teach the theory of relativity, they can't just draw equations on a board. Most people aren't going to relate to that. Or even if they do, even if they're mathematical thinkers, they're still going to need concrete examples to really understand how this process works. And so this is where the air element comes in. And just like we all breathe a common atmosphere, we all have certain concepts, you know, that are so basic and so universal that they can be used as a basis for communication. Like in prior eras, this would relate to language, but I think more and more language is in a complete state of decay. Like every aspect of our society is in a total state of decay and corruption right now. And this applies to the mind more than anything. And I think it's really the air element that suffers the most in our modern world. And we live in this kind of state of so-called ultra-crepidarianism, where people go out into public and they fight and argue about all their beliefs, but logic never comes into the picture. It's all about opinions. And in the public discourse, to what I witness, that's all it is. It's just people stating opinions. And often these opinions aren't even their own. They're just repeating unquestioningly whatever is presented to them, because that's how our society is structured. It's an authoritarian top-down structure where critical thought and the faculty of this air element to analyze coldly, logically, rationally, and understand on a deep pragmatic level different ideas and how they make sense and where they're applicable. What is the scope of their applicability? So just as a case in point, like for me, I live in a college town and it's pure communism. I mean, it's really disgusting and sad to me. And I've seen it I've lived here since 93. So off and on, you know, I've moved into other places, but generally I've watched the evolution of what the academic environment in a college town is like. And at this stage, we're in full communism, and it's fucking terrible. And the health and the intellect of all these people is so deteriorated. Like in the 90s, I used to love to sit and talk and have academic and, you know, philosophical, scientific discussions with people about ideas and ways of thought and comparing different eras of history and doing all these different things and being as pure of an intellectual as I could be. I love that. I'm all about that, you know. And back in the day, it was fun. It was joyful. And now it's like pure thought police. There is no intellect anymore. There is no rational thought. It's all about people's opinions and their emotions. And this is deliberate. It's not accidental. It's not happenstance. It's not a trend. It's not a fad. It's not a fashion. This is the agenda, okay? So we all need to work on this air element. We all need to learn how to communicate in an objective way as possible and to explain and analyze our own ideas and to be able to bridge the gaps. I mean, if there's people that have a different worldview than us, we need some objective standard to communicate with them and to logically demonstrate why we believe what we believe and how it makes sense and where these ideas are applicable. And this is all the faculty of the air element. So what you need to watch out for with this is getting too value neutral, where there's no morality. Like everything needs to be integrated. All these elements have to be integrated and balanced together. And if you have too much air, then it's coldly logical and there's no value judgments that enter into it or ethics. So this becomes a problem. That's it for today.